Hi, everybody. Welcome to Security Shift, podcast dedicated to the leaders, founders, and GTM operators who are building the next generation of secure revenue engines. In a world where AI is reshaping the threat landscape, the speed of business, the old playbooks for security, and the scale are broken. We're here to talk to the people that are in the trenches and rewriting them. So I'm your host, Hani Braish. My background's in building, scaling, optimizing B2B technology with a focus on security-led MSPs and vendors, helping design the automation layer that connects their operations directly to their revenue. The show isn't about theory, it's about tactics, strategy, and the mindsets required to protect your clients and aggressively scale your business in the agentic world of 2026. Today, we're joined by a true leader in the space, JT, Senior Director at Cyberhaven Securities. Welcome. Thank you for joining us here.
Thanks, Hani.
Thank you. So we could dig kind of right into the topic here, looking at kind of critical shifts required to build a defense strategy, right? So I think ultimately, okay, we're gonna have to cut this out, but basically, so getting started, JT, can you just give us a background about yourself, your journey, how you've kind of gotten to the place you're at now, and then maybe we'll go a little bit more into Cyberhaven and how they're kind of protecting the corporate landscape today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say like a lot of people in cybersecurity have some, their journey might be kind of steady. They started knowing they wanted to do computer engineering and went through the process. My travels were a little different, but I definitely was an early user of technology in my life, and playing around with computer programming, even though it's not where I went professionally. That just I just always kept my hands on technology. Kind of got started in a way when some family members are like, "Hey, can you do some consulting for us?" And I just kept that going in college. Had people asking me to help them with stuff, and I just kept that going along the side. Built my own small business consulting company. Learned a lot about sales in the process. So that was a very different pathway. Also, adopting a good mindset as somebody in technology. I knew when I was out of my league. So working with customers every now and then and call in the big guns, bring somebody else in who was smarter, knew something more about the technology I was working with and needed to help with. And really the last 5-6 years of my journey have been the core of my cybersecurity, direct cybersecurity practitioner foundation. Everything before that is all just building my foundation to be where I am today and what I've been doing now. But everything had, I'd say, the last 15 years has had touches of influence all in the security side of the house and understanding the technology and how these things interplay. So that's been part of the journey along the way. And I'd say that every piece of my journey, while some parts have been not cybersecurity, have been influential in me getting to where I am and leading organizations in the security footprint. My most recent foray now, as you mentioned, I'm at Cyberhaven. Been there about 4 months is the time where we're doing this recording right now. And this is my first foray working in a cybersecurity company. So now, it's already been a little different. Went to Black Hat in Las Vegas this year and now sat on both sides of the table. I'm both there as an attendee helping review and things for the security of my own company and what we're doing, as well as being a seller of cybersecurity services. Specifically, we do data security for organizations, built a data security platform.
Amazing. And then, so on that, I mean, you're in the trenches with this platform. What are the real blind spots today when it comes to data protection?
Sure. I think the biggest thing right now is, our core product is a DLP, data loss prevention, which might as well be a 4-letter dirty word in some of the industry. I have been an implementer of DLP in the past. That leaves us all with some PTSD and heartburn about how that system works. Came across Cyberhaven and was very impressed with what they are doing in that space, and now convinced me to come on board too and work in it. The biggest thing is we're just growing. Our data is amassing at light speed. It's just crazy how much we're working with data. I mean, we look back to how Facebook, thinking of Facebook has monetized consumer data, essentially giving the product away for free. It's really at the cost of the users, right? But there's a ton of data coming into that. I always thought that was big, but as corporations, we're doing that kind of scale on a regular basis now. We're just loading in gigabytes, petabytes.
It doesn't
We're
matter.
not worrying about gigabytes anymore. We're way past terabytes. We're talking about petabyte levels as being a normal part of conversation today. So it's really interesting to see that. And and then as we're moving into this AI, kind of I'll say the AI world, but as we're moving into a space where we use AI, we integrate AI in products. We have to be more conscious of what are we feeding into the AI systems? How are we tracking that? What are they processing on the output sides? We're seeing just huge amounts of data that we're thinking, oh, hey, I can use that data now instead of throwing it away. I throw it to the AI. I'm going to have it synthesize that. I'm going to get some output from it. So we're generating data on both ends of the equation. And the reality is, are we, as a in the commercial side of this, the business side of this, are we tracking that data? Do we know where it is, what it is, and even addressing should we have it?
Yeah, and what are the biggest challenges do you think on this transition of more companies collecting data in general, right? And how you use it and how basically Cyberhaven's looking at it right now. Kind of what are the bigger challenges that you see with that?
Yeah, for us, looking at it in two directions. One, just from the human element to it. So that's, fundamentally to the DLP side of the data security equation really looks at, hey, what data do you have personally? And do you have the rights to that data? Then should you be moving that data around, sending it externally, working with a consultant? We like to ensure that IP is controlled, that sensitive information is controlled. And the first step you have to know is what data do you have? What data is sensitive, confidential, HIPAA, PCI. And then once you know that, you can say, okay, well, how sensitive is that to movement? What do I want to allow or not allow? And those granular policies, those granular controls are really, really important. You can't just say like, oh, don't move any data. You inhibit productivity, but you also have to say, well, why are you sharing that with a personal to a personal G drive? That shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be doing that. The newest, and I'll say the newest thing. 3 years ago, ChatGPT comes around and everybody's like, oh, wow, what is this thing? It's all over the news. Everybody and your grandmother's asking you about it. So now we start thinking about that from the perspective of, well, hey, I want to summarize this meeting transcript I have to get the action items out of it. That's a simple enough request, normal thing for us to do. So I'm going to go copy paste a 20-page transcript into ChatGPT. Or name your AI. I'm not going to be specific here. Well, are you using your personal account for that? If you're using your personal account, almost certain then that learning is turned on. Now you just pasted whatever confidential information into the ether for that AI to learn on. And most companies would say, do not do that. Never do that. That's against policy, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something that we can think about from a data protection, right? You can say like, well, hey, you can't use that. But hey, we have these tools, right? Companies are launching, they have their co-pilots, they have their different AI systems and say, hey, well, here's our corporate account, learning's turned off, perfectly allowable for you to use that. Great. So we should be able to monitor that's what we go with. And then to go with the latest, we now have a few AI enabled browsers. This isn't just an extension, right? This is inherent to the browser. So we've just introduced something where, wow, if we don't put tight controls, maybe an allow-only approach to what we let our users in our company deploy on their computers. If we give them the rights to go ahead and install software pretty liberally, but maybe we just block a few things. Well, now they go out there and grab the latest AI-enabled browser. Again, well, the browser's free, so how does it monetize that? Learning's turned on. So now inherently this browser that you have an employee using is learning on sensitive information in your company, your corporate IP, your confidential information. It's scary. And I'll say this is a moment because like I'm bringing up AI enabled browsers. I mean, November, we're in November right now. There were 2 browsers just launched in the last 30 days. AI enabled browsers.
Yep. Everybody believes. I'll say like you're hearing more and more that it's a new operating system. Basically, nip it in the bud before it can get anywhere. So it's at the source. So that makes perfect sense. I mean, what recommendations do you have? I guess change the settings, right? Change the learning settings, but ultimately, anything else you would say around.
I'll tell you, as an example, Google a couple years ago had something like, I think it was 6 or 7 0 days in that calendar year. And it was like every other month I'm talking to my IT lead and saying, hey, we need to push the browser update right now on Chromium. And then we started looking at it and going, well, wait, who's on Signal? Who's using Firefox? Who's using Opera? Who's using XYZ browser that, what's on the browser list from our tooling in our operating systems? And we find 7 different browsers being used, and it's one person's using this one specialty one, it's just the one they like. Another person's got one they use, well, it's for testing purposes, they need to check that out. And you start thinking, well, okay, so how fast is Google at patching against that 0-day versus the other browsers? And we found some of those other browsers, they were taking a week to a week and a half to patch a critical 0-day that needed to be patched fast, and Google was on top of it in 24 hours or less. So sometimes you have to rein that back in. Now we're even at a different point where instead of just saying, well, hey, maybe I'm going to block a few of those browsers, I'm going to remind my employees, hey, stick with Chromiums, or stick with Chrome, stick with Firefox if that's set up in your environment and that's what you like. Now we actually might have to flip the equation with AI browsers and say, well, maybe I need an allow only approach. And for any listeners, just to help equate to that, allow only says, I only allow Chrome, I only allow Edge, I only allow Safari, full stop. Any other browser, it's blocked. You can't install it. So that we're there because of the AI browsers popping up. I think that from a corporate security perspective, we're at that point now. And it's not to inhibit productivity. It's just a reality of where we're at, that we can't trust just allowing these AI tools to be used openly unless we know that we can control whether they're learning from the information or not.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, ultimately, security is often seen as kind of a blocker, right? But it should be seen as an enabler in that you're avoiding some detrimental scenarios with your company, basically, if you adhere to some of these things that you're talking about. So definitely makes sense. And then, a lot of this is with the people, right? It are those who are using the technology, those who are basically doing these things. Like when did you realize it wasn't really just about the technology, right? It's about kind of these individuals and how they're using it in the process as well. I mean, when did that kind of shift happen? And just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been saying more lately, I find like, hey, wild, wild west. You look around the users in your company and it's having those good conversations.
Yeah.
I think honestly, it started just looking at the calendar, a bit about a year and a half ago, a little over a year and a half ago. I feel like GitHub Copilot was one of those first moments for any companies that were developing cloud software, and they looked at, hey, we have this AI tool to support us in coding now, GitHub Copilot. It'll sit there as kind of a sidecar and work with you, and it'll check stuff for you. You can get some code snippets from it. And the first reaction was, wait, hold on. What is that learning from? And we thought, well, does this thing have access to everybody's GitHub code? And then so that's what it learned from, I guess. And then, so could it potentially recommend code to a developer that is actually somebody else's IP? And then you integrate it, it gets found somewhere along the way, and like, oh, wait, you violated our IP, we're suing you now for millions.
Yeah.
That was the first worry about it. And I think GitHub spent the good next month or 2 months after they released it and these first legal opinions were out there, wondering about the uncertainty of it. They spent a good couple months looking at it, tightening things up a little bit, and then addressing that with the community. Such that, within a few months, our company said, which had initially said, hey, no, let's slow down just a little bit. If you want to use it personally, fine. Don't bring any code into our corporate environment. We were then able to say, this is okay to use now. Once the legal community had settled in a little bit, GitHub had refined things a little bit. So we got to that point. Now, here we are in 2025. I don't think anybody would give a second thought to whether GitHub Copilot's okay.
Yeah.
And a number of other code support tools that are using AI to support it.
Yeah. And if you look at kind of those users and what's happening out there and kind of, from a B2B perspective, the need for tools that you're talking about, how are you finding, educating, and essentially like positioning your solution in those areas that will benefit most from it, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of our users, I don't say a lot of our developers or engineers, they're the first ones to say, hey, I saw this new tool. Or, hey, I was playing with this hopefully personally, but they tried something out. Whether they were showed it or somebody referred them to it, they checked it out and they're like, this is really slick. I really like what this does. If they just for us, it's to say, hey, hand off to the security team. We'll take a quick look at it. All we're doing, we have our own checklist of like, hey, we need these things in place with the tool. We need to be able to lock down, does it have learning turned on or off? We need to know what their audit logging is like, to know like what what they're storing on input or output in the logs. Just basic security around the tool itself, right?
Yeah.
So we just want to know, like, have they checked the boxes on something we can use as a corporate user of this? And yes or no. And to any business user, sometimes it could be as simple as like, hey, I had this sales meeting here. I want to, generate me a quick email to this executive. It's like, again, when you're not using a corporate system, you're revealing your strategy in some way or another, business strategies. It doesn't need to be code, right? It can be as simple as the personally identifiable information, PII. It could be a business strategy itself that you're just like, you're suddenly revealing out to this AI if it's learning from it. So again, all these tools are great. All we're doing is trying to say, hey, let's check the box, make sure that the right security is in place for it to be used in a commercial environment.
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of tools come out where it's like they're 3 or 4 months into the market and they have all these boxes checked on security. I've seen others where they're over a year in the marketplace and they don't have anything really there.
And they
They're
still
really
don't
more like consumer level controls that just saying like, oh, hey, here you go, use a tool, have fun with it. And it's like, you shouldn't be doing that in a commercial environment.
Yeah, I'm seeing, you're in terms of compliances and what's, good or bad. I think good is going to be the case for most software for compliance moving forward, but how it's being used and how effective it is, I think is going to be more and more important. I don't know if you see that too, and if you have any insights, but ultimately I think, the gaps that we see are oftentimes there because of legacy systems, because of tools and processes in place that have had multiple turnovers and people that are not understanding what happens. And, you ask a few questions and, in any large corporation's environment, and you start to understand real quick that there's a lot of stuff that the leader there does not really know. So it definitely is a challenge these days, but I see the gap hopefully closing there.
I hope so too. It just I'll take this as a journey question, a journey comment to the look at the story. Last year this conversation was a little more interesting. This year we're at 3 years, so I'll go with that. But I asked people last year. I'd ask people a year and a half ago. I'd ask them like, hey, Gen AI, right? Generative AI. How long has it been around? How long has it been a thing? Not how long has it been around. How long has it been a thing, right? For everybody.
Yeah.
Like, almost common. We know about it. We've heard about it. It says November 2022. You can go back. I guess it's GPT-2 at that point. But I'm like, it's November 2022. Let's get perspective. We're at 3 years. We're only at 3 years. That in itself is incredible.
Exactly.
Just that part. Because we're already talking about what we are envisioning out 5 years. Some companies are trying to think of, put stuff out there that way. And to any of those, I would say, if we're only 3 years in, stop trying to project 5 or 10 years out from now. I can't quite imagine, and I challenge anybody who says they truly can, because they're probably brilliant thinkers, but fine. If you can truly imagine what we're going to be at 3 years from now.
Yeah.
In 2028.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely
We're only 3 years into this, and we're seeing things that we wouldn't have imagined 1 year into this period.
So it becomes less of a plan or expectations and more about what your imagination can allow you to get to at that point, right? It becomes sci-fi pretty quick if you follow it. Yeah,
You're helping bring this full circle. Have policies and controls. Have an approach. You need guidelines, not specifics for every little detail, because you don't know what the next thing is going to bring you. But if you have a playbook for that, if you have an approach, the approach should be flexible enough to handle it. My incident response playbook, I have some playbooks for specific types of incidents, but my general incident response playbook covers most types of things that could happen, because the path through the playbook is not different because of a specific type of event.
Yeah.
A specific action within might be a little different. I need an engineer to do one thing instead of another. But that's in the process of the actual response to an incident that might occur. Just to that with AI is just have an approach, have a checklist, have a set of things, criteria you need to know about. So once you can check the boxes on that security, then maybe the nuances of this new technology. That's your question. You're asking 3 different questions you've never asked before.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So, be tight on the approach, be flexible, be more, it's really strategic around protecting yourself versus like a tactical do this, do that, because ultimately things change so quick. The bad guys are going to stay ahead. And so if you're saying do this, do that, you're going to miss something, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that. And then JT, so you're saying you were at Cyberhaven, you've been at Cyberhaven now for 4 months. What do you think and what do you see are some of the biggest goals that you have or the organization has for FY26, kind of moving into the new year?
Yeah. Not to make a sales pitch for it at all, so I'll be light on that.
No,
We
do
just
it. Do it.
we just announced our we just announced beta on our DSPM side of the house, data security posture management. That's why when I introduced Cyberhaven to this, is we're really on the data security platform. We're looking at that whole picture, because while we found it on the DLP side of the house, that's at like the desktop, the endpoint. That's expanded a bit into our cloud data storage, right? So our G drives, our OneDrives of the world. The natural extension of that is to shift over to our cloud production side of the house. Even non-cloud companies are often deploying cloud systems for data storage with some of their tooling. So more and more we have all this data being stored in the cloud, stored in our, whether you're a SaaS company, a cloud company or not, you have GCP, Azure, AWS, and you're running things there. And the fact is, it's just like the endpoints. Where is the data? What do you have? Identifying it, what's your library look like, what is it, what is there, tagging it accordingly, being able to monitor to what it is. And then you have to look at, okay, now that I know what's all there, I can do some cleanup with that, right? Maybe that helps me secure things a little better. That's important. That's kind of like last year too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
identifying what's there,
It
and
depends.
a lot of tools kind of
There's
do that.
percentage like the gap is widening in adoption, I think. Yes, definitely last year, but still a lot of companies have to catch up.
Yeah. So then I look at that as, let's take it where it needs to go. So now once we have the identification out of the way, then you have the really hard part. How do you want to control the data flows there? So some tools are on the security side of the house. They're looking at learning from the data flows to say, hey, what's normal and what's not? What might be unusual? And so that's how they give you an AI engine. It's doing its things there. And if the AI engine is generic, then they probably tuned it or trained it on like, hey, look for these kind of some OWASP patterns, some MITRE attack patterns that make that align well with an attack path. So watch for those. A more learning system would say, hey, I've been watching your data for 2 months when we deployed this system. Now I know what normal looks like in your environment. When
Yeah.
somebody hacks in, still not, the tooling might not see that, but now they spin up a publicly exposed S3 bucket and try to move your critical data into that bucket to expose out to the public, where they're going to go grab it all from another external point, and then a few hops later you have no idea where that data went. That pathway in today's security tools, they're starting to get there too, and that's where say like that's a path that we can look towards as well. Is once you know what your data is, what it's identified as, right, then you can say, well, hey, I can put policy control to say, hey, this data should never get publicly exposed. I don't even need to wonder about the AI learning that. I have the tight controls to do that now for myself. That's what we brought to the endpoint side of DLP, and that's what we can bring to the cloud side of data storage and data security as well. And then at the end of the day, it's right. You still don't want to inhibit productivity, so data needs to be able to move, right? And that works. And that's part of how we look to integrate AI as well. One big thing for us is lineage, so we can track the data from its origination through whatever's happened with it. So somebody pulls a file, they turn that file into a PDF, makes sense. They shared it with a couple people. They need to see that as a report. They go through that. Next person gets that PDF, changes the file name, holidaycards.pdf, and then tries to send it to themselves. Well, we've tracked that data all along the way, so we know all the movements of it. And then they hit the policy break, right? This file is confidential information, should not be shared to a personal email address or to a personal data storage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we do. So now I can take that to the cloud and say, hey, this is our customers' data. This data should only be shared within this circle of production systems in my environment. That's it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
now if
super,
somebody
super.
tries to pull that data, share it in to a place that it's not supposed to go, we should be able to look at that and say, no, don't allow that data movement to happen. Oh, by the way, flag the admins too. Let them know, hey, we're seeing an attempt to move the data. We stopped it, and you can see what happened with it.
Yeah,
So that's the nirvana moment, right? People somebody's will have to decide themselves too, do they want the automations or not? And I think today where companies are asking the question, they're definitely in the I need to know what's there and I'll figure out the policy controls. As
yeah,
data expands, I hope they'll be a little more amenable and they'll move into the automation and letting the tooling help people with this, because it's only the amount of data and where it is only expanding. So nothing like
exactly.
getting a tool that tells you have 20,000 things you need to review once you install
Exactly.
it.
What's your priority? Pick one. Exactly. So computers could do some of these things a little bit better, I think, than humans. So hopefully it picks up. I agree. Now, in that balance with humans and kind of it's really along the theme of like, AI not replacing people. It's really augmenting what they're doing to a certain extent. I mean, give me a little bit of insight as to how you see that, and maybe that human element involved. What how much is that necessary or not in your perspective?
Yeah. I if somebody were to pick a side of the house where it's like where I've had to spend the most time in, I guess, is GRC. I hate to say it, but it's an interesting side, having to go through compliance and data privacy and controls. The reality with that, on that part is a lot of countries have already said, they don't want AI decision making. So let's just go right to agentic AI, right? Is an AI making decisions and acting on them without necessarily human intervention. It might have some guidelines, but it's making a decision. So we've definitely seen those policies come through from companies, from customers, as well as, it seems to be going, EU AI Act, and looking at some of the AI controls. They're saying, well, hey, we don't want AI making decisions, especially of an HR nature. So a hiring or firing decision should not be solely run by an AI system. I don't remember the exact specifics, but there were a couple of companies that adopted an AI HR tool, and the AI was making the decisions on whether or not any resumes at all got through the screening system. And they found out after not too long that the AI system was absolutely discriminating against protected classes. So civil rights protected classes.
Yeah.
That got both the company that was providing the tool in trouble and the companies who had bought the tool in trouble very quickly. So it kind of went to full stop. The other side of that equation is true too, is that, and it's a funny area. I can make a spreadsheet. I can tell an AI to get, to summarize some data and give me that spreadsheet, and I can sort it. AI could sort it, whatever. I can look at that data and then I can make a decision based on the data. Underperforming employee, maybe I'm just looking like, oh, hey, this guy's just, whatever the metric is, right? And not to pick on developers, engineers, right? But one of the key metrics they look at is lines of code. How many lines of code do you generate per hour, per day, whatever, and an error metric. Usually those are a couple of the key ones in that realm. Maybe I sort that list and if I need to lay somebody off, do I use that? The breaking point is when I use AI to tell me who to lay off. And that's the point where like countries and policy and are saying, no, you don't get to do that.
Yeah.
But yet a spreadsheet, a human needed to make that decision, because a human
Yeah.
could also look at something and say, hey, you know what? No, that person actually is in this specialty role. I'm not going to lay somebody off here. I'm not going to lay them off, because if you're telling me I have to lay somebody off, that's not the person to lay off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very much from the flip side of this, I'm a believer in embracing AI. I feel that we do a lot better managing our path through something like this, and no doubt we're in the first phase yet of disruption from AI in the workforce. I read plenty of the business analysts and the Wall Street stuff, and the economists that get commented on right now. They're saying any company saying they're firing is due to AI efficiency is a red herring. It's not what's real. They just don't see it in the massive data, the macro data. It might be company by company. There could be some truth behind it, but they don't see it in the macro data, because at the macro level, it should be a lot different. It should be bigger, really, is
Yeah.
what they're saying. You should see it more massively. They're just seeing it too specific. It feels a little bit like some of the layoffs as interest rates popped up, especially in the tech community. It was more like they had excessive hiring. You started hearing stories about some very big tech companies and employees who were hired in 2019, 2020, 2021, who literally hadn't done a single job, a single project since they joined the company years prior even. Just go to show some companies they had just hired excessively because they thought they might need those people, and they would get them while they could and hire them while they could. So I feel that AI is enabling us. We can do more, can be more efficient with it. As running some vulnerability management programs in my time too, I love being able to take some basic information and be able to plug it into an AI prompt and say, hey, how would these specific circumstances be used to exploit my environment? And then getting that feedback back from it is like, I can go dig for 5-10 minutes through some threads and find that information out. Some of the different sources I have, checking out the information on the CVE, looking through different feeds on that, threat vectors for it. I can go find that information out. But I can also prompt GPT and get a pretty good summary of what I need to know in 15, 20 seconds. And we're seeing that in some of the tools out there, the CrowdStrikes, Wizzes, Upwinds of the world. I'm sure some of the Tenables and Qualys are doing it as well, Palo Alto and others. It's like you're starting to integrate AI to help be a supporter, right? Help summarize this information in plain English so that I understand it, because I can sift through that data, but when you tell me it affects this type of server in this way through this configuration, then I can go look at my configuration and say, oh, cool, I don't use that configuration. Check.
Yeah, correct. Right. And it's the same kind of
scared me tons of time right there.
Yeah, but whether it's firing somebody or blocking configuration, right? I think ultimately it's about like the risk involved with the automation, or the risk involved, or the liability potentially involved with taking an action based on the visibility that you have, right? So today there's kind of, I mean, there's an innovative push, obviously, for that, right, to be on the cutting edge. But as a corporation or a lot of entities don't see the need to kind of jeopardize their position, right, and their credibility doing something when they can learn and do it better later, as long as they get the users now to basically see what's happening and then start putting some of these automation controls in place. I think makes a bit of sense. But we definitely see the writing on the wall, right? So.
Absolutely.
And then JT, you talked about some of these tools internally. You talk about metrics. What's the most surprising tool, or I'll put it this way, I guess. What Cyberhaven, or what would you like to do differently to where you believe you could really enhance your posture with an AI tool today, right?
I think there's an interesting opportunity, and I've seen a lot of it in the last 8 to 12 months. So I think we're gonna get there quickly, but a lot it's not the AI SOC. I think it's like the AI pen testing, AI red teaming, maybe. That might be a good area, just to say it's like the AI red teaming, and it borderlines on pen testing. And the reason for that is there's a lot of open source tools, first off, that the communities uses for a lot of this scanning, red teaming, pen testing work, external infrastructure scans. There's a lot of different tools we can point at our infrastructure and see from an outside perspective. The guy's really well equipped to do a lot of that. And there's a lot of tools that have a whole ton of MITRE ATT&CK exploit systems built into them. It's always fun when you deploy a legitimate tool and your antivirus, anti-malware scanners are just going, no, you have, this file's not allowed. And you're like, actually, it's literally what I deployed.
The only thing I need to use right now. Yeah.
It's supposed to attempt a Cobalt Strike attack. Like, it's supposed to look like that attack, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun when you do that. The AI systems, they're really well equipped to do these more structured approaches. They're also really scarily equipped to get creative and attempt to do more than that, which is good. I mean, that's where we want them to get. And then from the application testing point of view, that seems like the hardest thing for an AI system to go test, because it can only look at what's there. But I've seen a couple recently that they're essentially reading the HTML on the page, and they're operating through the HTML on the page. They just it's like I'll say like a hound dog or something, say it's taking that link and following it to its natural conclusion. And if the tree branches 20 different ways and creates a million permutations, well, AI can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Human, you're not going to get a team of humans, pen test humans, to do that in a year. Let alone, the AI can follow these pathways through all of their iterations. So I think there's potential there for us to see those systems mature to the point we can trust, that we as security practitioners can trust them, that is as good as me hiring a pen tester. And that might switch gears from, when I hire a pen tester for that work, I hire the pen tester for their creative skills and knowledge to use those tools and be the extra layer that those tools just can't get to. And maybe those tools will get there. I don't see it yet, but there is a gap. The pen testers I've worked with, they are creative in a way that AI just seems to miss. So kudos to them. I'll say they know their stuff. And I think that's job security for now. The AI could get there, but it's still a lot to ask it to do something that's never been done before. Because that's ultimately AI is, as much as we call it generative, it's still usually using history.
It's got to pull from somewhere.
Yeah, it's doing something that's been done before. When is it the pathway? I'll give a shout out on this one to CrowdStrike. Looked in the last year and a half, they put this in one of their published reports out there. It just said that it's the combination of a lot of like low severity CVEs they were starting to see get exploited a little bit more. It wasn't the one critical or high that somebody managed to exploit. It was actually this combination of like 5, 7, 8 little things that individually people were like, that's low priority. I got to go after my high criticals and highs, and I got a bunch of mediums to take care of right now. They started realizing there were interrelationships between a lot more lows and mediums that could lead to a critical exploit of an environment. So they adjusted some of their tooling to start addressing those, where they started seeing the interconnections.
Yeah.
That's the kind of creative approach where somebody had to notice that in the data, pay attention to it, and then could work with it. And that's where I feel like, same thing to my pen testers, right? They look at something and say, well, hey, if I do something a little differently this way, can I do something that's not supposed to happen and it hasn't been thought of? And if the answer is yes, oh, wow, thank you. You now found a pathway that I need to go correct for and protect in my environment before potentially a hacker gets to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It really speaks to I feel like it speaks to the outlier comments you were making previously, where you're looking for kind of like outlier behavior, right? And then trying to basically get under the radar. I mean, it feels like the badass actors are always one step ahead. They see the money there and they just figure it out. And then, in cybersecurity, it's trying to close those gaps, right? Like, but if we can get proactive, I mean, that's where I think it'll make a big difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the biggest crux of it all, is the AI is better at offensive security than defensive so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's enabling a single hacker to do what a team of 20 used to do. That's the biggest crux of it now.
Yeah.
I think it was somebody said this, summarized it best. They said the script kiddie is now what it can now exploit what it took a nation state to do 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy.
That's like, you just went from level 1 to a level 3 hacker and that fast.
Overnight.
Like, oh no.
Yeah, with a phone or with a laptop, right? So.
Yeah. So it makes me really that much more worried what the nation states are doing, or could do compared to what they used to do.
Valid concerns for sure, right? It's a quick moving world right now, and I think the more we're aware and we're educated on some of these solutions, the better. So I really appreciate you sharing all that, JT. Now a little bit more kind of into the landscape into FY20 in calendar year 26, and because you spoke a little bit about like sending emails, what's in those emails, what people can exploit, what people can do, right? And emails, LinkedIn messages, whatever you like, calls, there's always, that activity is always going on in corporations. And so what are you at Cyberhaven doing to kind of ensure that you're locking things down, number one? Number two, you're on the cutting edge of trying to accelerate these tools at the same time, right? Because it's a balancing act at the end of the day. So any insight on how you're doing that at Cyberhaven?
Yeah, largely, I'll say first off, there's one thing that hasn't changed is the fundamentals. Once worked with a business coach and somebody said one year, they said, hey, it seems like you're still kind of promoting, doing these certain things, but we heard those last year. And he said, are you doing all of the things I told you last year? Well, no. Good. Then you haven't learned everything I've told you yet. So
Exactly.
yes,
Keep going.
fundamentals are still really important, right? We need to go through, check the boxes on fundamentals. What are we protecting? Just go through the stack from developers working at the end of the day through deployment operations. What do we do once it's live in the environment? And then the human element is huge. I don't remember the exact stats, so I won't make it up, but I know it was a significant difference that human-led social engineering breaches in essentially in the last approximately 12 months now had elevated significantly over the prior year or two. The reality is it's everything that gets done after that step, after I get credentials for somebody. So it's less that environments are being hacked directly and more that somebody social engineered getting access to somebody's system. And then what's the failure that happened? The failure that happened is somebody had elevated privileges that maybe they shouldn't have had standing privileges that high. They had admin level for key systems that, hey, maybe that should have been through a privileged access management system that would help, elevate for the moment and not have that as standing access. So those are the kind of things that if you do the fundamentals right, it's a little harder for somebody to exploit the social engineering side and just use credentials and then exploit those credentials as massively as they have been. MGM hack a year ago in Las Vegas, of all places, of course. It's actually right before Black Hat, I think. Was a group of hackers, including a kid they actually just arrested in Las Vegas. It was like 17 or 18 years old too. And it started with a social engineering attack. That's it. They called the guy, they had him do something, reset something, and go look online, you can find all the description of what exactly went down. But it's like, it started there. It started with social engineering. A lot of stuff starts with it's a phishing email. It's a phishing message. And the old school idea this is usually on the consumer side, was phishing was all about, I'm going to try and, get the people that click. There's misspellings. There's obvious markers, right? It's about the 3 out of 1,000 people that still clicked on something. It's because they were, for lack of a better way of putting it, they were just dumb. And the people, the hackers, the thieves, they knew that. They knew if you clicked on this thing, you're the 3 out of 1,000 people that are going to click on this thing. You're already down, you're already a little lower on the bar that now I can exploit you. It's going to be really easy for me to get something from you, steal your money, have you share your bank account with me and exploit you. With AI, to bring it full circle with our AI discussion, now I can make really, really good targeted phishing campaigns. In fact, I could launch a targeted phishing campaign against all the Fortune 500 executives fairly easily using AI to write most of it and customize the emails, create and launch an email SMTP server to send them all.
Yeah.
Almost all of it could be automated with AI, and now suddenly every single person I sent messages to got something customized to them. And just for good measure, I'm gonna go really fun with it, game this one out. Maybe even pulled some stuff off of their social media and injected that into the message. How personalized could I game this out, right? This is threat. Yeah. This is really just going through that threat intelligence and threat vectors approach of thinking about security the way, as somebody who wants to do something nefarious would do. Yeah. What kind of things could I do? And so now it's not about misspellings or obvious things in a phishing email. Now the better they are, the more likely somebody clicks on it, the more likely somebody might plug in their credentials. The screen looks like it's supposed to look because it has the right graphics. It looks the same, but something's just a little off. If you know what to look for, you might spot it, but it might take you a little while. You might need 10 seconds instead of 3. So 2026, doing the fundamentals is really important. AI has made that even more relevant, which means more reminders to the people I work with that the human element's one of the most important things here. Be on the lookout, slow down just a little bit, and I'll give that as my number one. I talk to my teams about this so that I do my phishing tests, right? Like we all should be doing, hopefully out there. The number one thing when I ask everybody, why did you click? Usually they don't get to the point of credentials, so cool. It stopped short of that. But I always ask the people, why did you click? What was the thing? I can tell you almost every time it's the same answer. And it's been for years. So this hasn't changed. I was in a rush.
Yep.
That's it. I was
In a
in a
hurry,
rush.
overlooked it. Yeah. No big deal.
Yeah,
Just a
that was
big,
it.
massive exploit after that.
They didn't take the extra 2 or 3 seconds to stop and say, was I expecting this? Does the domain look right? Hey, let me double check that URL matches to something I'd expect it to match up to. It's DocuSign, not DocuSLNE. It's like it actually is, you can check these things pretty easily, even on a phone. If somebody's using a phone and they're for accessing email or something, a corporate email, you can long press on a link and usually it'll pop up and show you the whole domain. Just there's these little things, but it's always did you take the 3 seconds to do it versus you were in a rush.
Yeah. No,
Same story
absolutely.
over and over.
Awesome, JT. Well, thank you. Very insightful. Thanks for joining us here, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Hani.